Next, we have uh, Jami Dennis, and I actually ran into her in Women in Geospatial Plus, um, which is an organization providing diversity and equity in the geospatial industry. And then we got to spend some time at Urissa. We were in a couple of things together, so that was a whole lot of fun. And we hope to see more from her. So we'll let Jami introduce herself. She's from Geodetic Analysis LLC, and she will help us make our work stand out.
Okay. Thanks, Jennifer. Am I coming through okay?
Yep.
Okay. I am going to share my screen. Start this up. Okay. All right. So yeah, so I'm Jami Dennis. My background is GIS. I've spent over 25 years in GIS, worked in state government for 15 years, and then I went on to Regional Council of Governments in the Phoenix, Arizona area, all in Arizona. So I'm really happy to be here and excited to be, well, here virtually with you guys, Wisconsin. So it's pretty exciting. Thanks for having me. And let's see my background. And now I'm working, like Jennifer said, I have my own little company doing some consulting work, Geodetic Analysis, doing GIS, a lot of data analysis, and some data visualization. And so Jennifer asked me to share with you guys some tips on data visualization. And so that's what I'm going to go through here. And so what this presentation is about, it's more about the fundamentals of data visualization. So I'm going to offer you some tips and techniques to improve your visualizations, and whether they're maps, charts, posters, hub sites, dashboards, that sort of thing. Hopefully you'll walk away today with some good tips and ideas and inspiration to make your work really stand out. Okay, so let's start out with, why do you want to visualize data? Well, we visualize data. I guess most of us, if we're GIS users, this is what we do every day with our data, right? You visualize it on a map. Maybe you put a chart together in Excel, something like that. So it's important for understanding and analyzing your data. But this talk, what I want to focus on is how you share that information and your data out with others. Okay, so not just for yourself. So, you can have all the data in the world right at your fingertips, but it's not going to do you any good if people don't understand it. So the data aren't going to just leap off the page and convert themselves into a beautiful map or high quality, useful information like this quote says. So you need to do something with it. And once you've gathered your data, you've done your analysis, you'll see a trend, maybe you come to some conclusion, you get some aha moment from your data. How do you make that stand out? How do you share it with others? So I'm going to start with an example of what I think is a really, really one of the great visualizations. This is a flow map, and many of you have probably seen this before, I'm not sure. But it's a map. It was done by Charles Joseph Menard in about 1869, and what it describes here, and I'm going to pull up my laser pointer here, is it's a map, and it describes Napoleon's march, the French army from the Polish-Russian border into Moscow. Okay, so they start over here at the border, the Polish-Russian border, and the width of this bar, this tan line, is how many troops there are. And you may not be able to see, but it's 422,000 troops that they started with. And they march along here. Some troops get sent this way. They continue. And notice the line is getting thinner as they have some battles. They're losing men. By the time they get all the way to Moscow, there's only 100,000 men left. They turn, they come back, they're retreating. This black line below here shows that it's 1812, it's the winter, it's Russia. Temperatures are dropping, it's freezing. So also on this chart is temperatures. And so they're losing men because they're dying because of obviously the weather, they have no food, or supplies are low anyway. But they're retreating, they get into some more battles, people die from all sorts of reasons. By the time they get all the way back to the end, we zoom in here, There's only 10,000 men left in the battle. That's pretty powerful stuff. This chart, Charles Menard did this. He pulled the data and he wanted to show the devastation that war can cause. And you can really see, I mean, look at how dramatic. It's a really great visual and data of the data. So we really proved his point there. And so one of the quote, you'll see I like quotes. This one was actually attributed to Napoleon Bonaparte saying, a good sketch is better than a long speech. And that's kind of what I want to impress on you. So let's make a little modern version of this, and we can call it a good chart is better than a large spreadsheet, or since we're GIS, a lot of us are GIS people, a good map is better than a large geodatabase. That's just, you know, I kind of took a little leeway there with Napoleon's words, but if he were alive today, I think he'd say this. All right, so let's jump in. I want to tell you about the 5 qualities of great visualizations. And so hopefully this will give you a foundation and stuff to really start thinking when you create your maps, your charts, your hub sites, that sort of thing. Now, these 5 qualities come from Alberto Cairo in his book called The Truthful Art. And I'll have that on a slide at the end, so you'll have all these resources that I may mention. But anyway, it's an excellent foundation, like I said. So let's get rolling here. The first one is truthful. A great visualization is going to be truthful, and in that it's based on thorough and honest research. So of course I have an example. Here is a chart that was done for Reuters, an article out of Reuters by Christine Chen. She created this chart to show gun deaths in Florida. When you first look at this chart, I'm sure you looked right here because it's your eyes draws to here. And so after Florida enacted its stand your ground law, oh, deaths dropped. Wow, that's pretty cool, but look again, right? Some of you maybe already jumped ahead and saw this. What's over here? It's upside down, right? So it's a little misleading. They didn't really drop, did they? To her credit, I think Christine Chen, the one who designed this chart, was going for like blood dripping to make it a little more dramatic, but she's misleading her audience. And so to that, you tend to lose your credibility if you mislead. So, you know, I went and I looked up the data. So she was truthful. She used the right data, but she displayed it in such a way that it was not, and it was very misleading. So don't undermine your credibility. The second quality, functional. A great visualization is functional in that it's an accurate depiction of the data, and it's built in the way that lets people do meaningful operations with it. So here's an example. Okay, this is really not functional chart. This is actually from a report. I won't share who the author is because I don't want to embarrass the organization that created this in a report, but it's not functional because, one, it has way too many slices of a pie. Pie charts really ideally should have maybe 2 to 4, 5 if you push in it slices. Otherwise, it just gets too unwieldy and out of hand. Go with something different. The colors, there's so many colors, and there's no logic to how the order of these were even presented. So what I did was I took this data and I thought of a way we could make this functional. Something simple, use a bar chart. I don't need multiple colors. I can use one color, and I can simply look right away. You can see the top causes of emission sources right here. And then if I'm actually doing a presentation or a report or something on maybe unpaved roads, I could take it one step further and highlight that by graying out all the rest and highlighting the one key point, data point that I wanted to talk about. So it's more functional. Okay, the third quality is beautiful. And of course, I had to pick an example for beautiful being a map. And this is a map that Lauren Tierney created for the September 13th of the Washington Post. It appeared in the printed edition when all the fires on the West Coast. And so I'm gonna scan this a little bit because it was a big old page so you can see the whole thing. But it's really beautiful. It's a really good example of a beautiful visualization. She uses some subtle background colors so it doesn't distract. And her key information here is some nice bright colors to show the fire and how far it's spread. And you can even see it in relation to these populated areas in these light purple colors. So it's a really great example of a beautiful visualization. The fourth quality is insightful. So in other words, it's insightful. It will reveal evidence that we may have a hard time seeing otherwise. So this is an example from the Wall Street Journal. And they did this, it was several years ago, but measles. So each line represents the states and the cases from 1928 up to 2012. And you can see right away, right here, this black line that shows when the vaccines were introduced. and how the cases dropped off dramatically. It's very insightful. You can see it right away. It reveals the evidence, and the measles were practically eliminated in the 90s and 2000. And I would venture to guess this part right here, without looking at more data, probably when the anti-vax movement started, we started to see some more cases. But that's the fourth quality, so it's also insightful. So the fifth quality, and the last one, is enlightening. So enlightening in such a way that your audience can grasp and accept the evidence that it predicts. And this is one of my favorite visualizations. Many of you have probably seen this one before, but a good visualization is going to change people's mind for the better. And that's exactly what this chart did. This is known as the hockey stick chart. And I'm sure living up in Wisconsin, you guys all love hockey. And I do too, even though I live in the desert. But this is called the hockey stick chart because it basically looks like a hockey stick laying down. See the shaft, and there's the blade. What it depicts is the scientists took average temperatures from 1961 to 1990. And that's this dark line here. And then they got temperature readings from thermometers, or the red lines. And then when it goes back in time, they went back 1,000 years. The blue lines are where they got ice cores, historical records, and so forth to record it. Okay, so they charted this, and they showed the temperatures away from this normal. And you can see when man-made greenhouse gas emissions and so forth started happening, look at the temperature rise. Okay, so this was an eye-opener. They showed this, and it just really changed people's mind on climate change and global warming. My mind goes so far as to say this one chart has all 5 of the qualities. It's truthful. They've got all their information laid out right here in front of you, even these gray bars. So this is their confidence interval. So they're showing you everything right there. They're truthful. They're displaying it in such a way that it's easy to understand, so that it's functional. That's the second one. And beautiful, maybe it's not like Lauren Tierney's beautiful map, but it's beautiful in such a way that it's designed, and it's in a way that it's aesthetically pleasing for its intended audience. And when this was first put out, it was put out at a conference to a bunch of scientists, and so they could easily grasp and see what this was. So I would call that beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. It's also insightful because we can see things that we wouldn't normally see. And of course, enlightening because it changed people's mind for the better. So that's the 5 qualities of great visualizations. So let's move on. Getting your data into a great visualization is probably not going to happen right away, even if you know these 5 foundation, 5 qualities. It might take you some different iterations, looking at your data, and don't be afraid to play around with different types, maps, charts, graphics, sort of thing. But before you can even begin to do all that, the first thing you need to do is understand your data. Excuse me. So you can have huge data sets like this, okay? Thousands of records, a lot of fields, a lot of attributes. And I know you're thinking, no problem. I'm gonna look at the metadata, because the metadata is gonna be like this. It's gonna be, oh, so beautiful. It's gonna have descriptions. It'll have all the fields. It'll list all the limitations of the data, right? Probably not. If you're like me, most of the data you're gonna get will look like this, your metadata, with nothing in it at all. So ask yourself, go back to the person that you've talked to or that you got your data from. That's one of the key things you can do, is ask. When you have data, that's the most important thing, is to ask the questions. So whether you're the person that is creating the data, you can ask yourself these questions, or if you're getting it from somebody else. So find out who created the data, where do they come from, what's the methodology, how were the data collected, what are the data about, what do they represent, does it make sense, how does it relate to other data, when was it created. We have a lot of time series data. You want to compare stuff back in time. Don't try to pass off old data as new data. Make sure you know when the data were created, and your audience does if you're creating something that a data visualization. And where, what level of geography was it created at? Make sure you know all these things. And of course, why were the data collected? So once you have the full information about your data, what you need to know now is who's your audience. Okay, I have a grip of my data, but who am I presenting to? Who is going to see this? All right, am I presenting to elected officials? Am I presenting to technical people, to just my teammates? Do I have to present something to the general public? These are all questions you need to ask yourself. So you can get your target audience, and that way you will have a better idea of how to present your idea, your data, in such a way that your audience will understand it. So once you know your target audience, ask yourself this: what do I want my audience to know or do? In other words, what's your story? This works whether it's just a simple chart, a map, a story map, a hub site, that sort of thing. These questions are important. So you can go about with your story. So one of the things that I've done, and it's kind of harder now with Teams since we're all remote, but you can jump on a whiteboard, start laying out, if you're making a map, list down all the layers that you have, walk through the experience, start diagramming what your user experience will be. What do you want them to see? What do you want them to get out of this? If you're doing a presentation, like when I was preparing for an earlier version actually of this presentation, I like to start writing stuff down. So I start diagramming right away. So this is an idea of what you can do. Dashboards are really popular right now. If you're working on dashboards, stickies, Post-it notes are great for that, because you can put all the things that are going to the little different dashboard boxes, stick them on a little sticky and stick them on the wall or on a table. So you can start figuring out, laying out how it's going to be, and make sure you have all your important elements there, okay? So these seem like for larger stories, websites, presentations, but like I said, even if you're just making one chart, you still should have an idea of what is the point and what's the story. What is it you want your audience to know or do based on your visualization? So I'm going to keep showing you examples too. Let's talk about designing for the medium. So the medium, whether you're going to do a presentation, you're doing a website, something interactive, just a simple chart in a report, a pamphlet, that sort of thing. And I'm going to start by giving an example of PowerPoint presentation, because that's kind of what got me started down this route anyways. I found that I was presenting all the time. So when I worked for the Maricopa Association of Governments, MAG, I'll refer to it as MAG, that's the Phoenix Regional Council of Governments. When I worked for them, I had to go in front of the mayors a lot to show them information. And one time I went and I had to present on the Great Recession, the recession in 2009, 2010, and when the recession hit, and Phoenix was hit really hard with a housing crisis. So we had all these foreclosures. And so my first instinct used to be, just do a bullet point, start out with bullet points, and maybe if I want to highlight some of the key things, I can maybe put some color in there, right? But when you're standing in front of mayors, a lot of times their eyes glaze over and you want them to pay attention to this. It's important. You want them to know what's going on. So a better way to do this, and what I ended up doing, was instead, I took those bullet points. I didn't even use a slide like this. I started with a map, okay? A map right here. So in 2010, there were 64,000 properties in the Phoenix metro area in some sort of foreclosure. Then by today, when I was giving this report last year, 2019, down to just 3,700 properties. So my data's there. It's very visual. And take a look at what I've done here. This was for a presentation. I used up the whole slide. So this is a tip I'm going to give you, is if you're doing a map for a PowerPoint presentation, you have all this real estate. Take advantage of it. A key thing you can do, and this is something really simple that didn't dawn on me until a friend said, you can just set your page size in ArcMap or ArcPro to the size of your slide. Instead of clicking and clipping it. Sounds obvious. If you don't know the sizes, this is what it is in PowerPoint. For those of us that do PowerPoints a lot, which many people do, a standard 4x3, this is the 10 inches by 7.5, and the widescreen like I'm showing here, that's the sizes to make your page. And if you forget it, go to PowerPoint on the design tab, and over on the right, slide size, and you can set a custom size if you need to. So use these tools that you have to your advantage. And if you're worried that you're going to get in front of, like I would get in front of the mayors and forget what I have to say when I'm showing those maps, because it might be a little intimidating, you're in front of all these elected officials, use the notes sections of PowerPoint. Stick them down in there so you remember your points. And then when, hopefully, these days, most PowerPoints go into presenter mode. Okay, so you can have your laptop in front of you, Behind you on the screen is your presentation showing that they're looking at, but you're looking at your notes, and it's going to look like this if you haven't seen that before. So that's what it would look like. I have my notes right there. I could speak to it, and I see what's on the big presentation screen in the background. And in fact, right now I can see this because I actually have two monitors while I'm presenting virtually. And in front of me is my presenter mode, and on my second monitor to my right is what you guys are seeing. So that's a tip for you for presentations. Well, what if you're doing something printed? Okay, if I'm doing a poster or a report or a brochure. You know, when I'm doing a presentation, let me back up. When you're doing a presentation, you have more control over the information your audience is going to get, right? Because I'm speaking it. I can tell you what I want you to know. If you're doing a poster or something printed, it's harder. You don't have as much control. So you need to make sure to design it in such a way that you have enough information that your audience can see it. Now, here's a poster. Yeah, here's a poster example. This was done by a colleague of mine at MAG, and she did this poster understanding this area within the Phoenix metro area. And so she used a nice complementary colors throughout the poster, right? And she also started, remember we read from left to right. So she started on this side with the base information, the intro info, and then she filled in with all the other pertinent information. And this was what she really wanted to get across, was about the housing in this area and how they can no longer afford it. There's more renters there and not so much owners, and how much the prices are going up there. So it's pretty unique, and use these tools to your advantage. Okay. A printed document, here's an example. We had this brochure, it was a two-sided thing, and every year we would update these fast facts about our region. And we would, you know, I'd be the one that have to come up with all these data points, and so we'd update this document. And finally I thought, you know, then we could do this better. Does anybody really want to read all these things? So I sat down and I went through this and tried to pick out what the most important points were, and came up with a nice brochure like this. So we still have some verbiage in here. So we still have a little intro. We got a little map where Phoenix is. And then just some graphs and charts that basically take that data and put it into this 4-page brochure that you just open up, 11 by 17 sheet of paper, folds in half, and it's got all these nice key elements, and it becomes a nice handout. So think about the medium, think about what you have to present and how to present it to your audience. Story maps are awesome for this. So now we take it a step further. You don't have as much control over your audience as you do when you're speaking to them, but a story map you still do, because people need to go with that flow. So you can design it in such a way, instead of a poster where I can go up and I can look at any part of that poster, story map, I pretty much start from the beginning and go through. Some of them aren't, you know, you can click around, but still something like this, which is a great one. This was done by the USDA. It highlights farmers actually in Marinette County there in Wisconsin. So it shows there's a little map. Anyway, and it goes through some of those, goes through the whole story. But take advantage. This is an example of a very simple dashboard type story. One simple click, it has one topic, one idea. The color scheme is they're complementary, they work well together. And don't be afraid to have white space, okay, or some blank space. You don't need to fill in every single little block. Sometimes you can use blank spaces to your advantage, so remember that too. But what you want to do is you focus on what's important, okay? So focus your audience's attention on what's important. So let me show you a quick example. Here is, this is the actual data from a conference, the Arizona GIS conference last year, and we pulled them on our social activities. And so you see all the percentages here, and the first thought is probably going to be to do something like this, pie charts. So we can look at each one of those little different things and see how they are. Clearly the one with the most blue, so I can see, yeah, this one was the best one. Everybody liked Trivia Challenge. But then I'm looking at these and I'm like, okay, wait, are the orange, which one's more, which one's less? And then I have to keep going back and forth. So again, back to the functionality, right? It's not very functional. So instead, I can turn it into something like this, right? I've removed a lot of the clutter. I've put everything together. I've put my main topic right here becomes the title of my chart, 90% rate positive rating. You look at that, you see the 90%, it's also shown here. So quickly I can see that positive, everything excellent and good is considered positive in this aqua blue green color. And then the gray stuff is the stuff that's not so good, right? So I can quickly see what people liked and what we did good on over the year, but then I can also easily see these ones down here that we need to work on for the next year, right, to make it better. So simplify things. Let's look at a map. So here's an example. This is an actual map that somebody had in a presentation. I did add this goofy little logo and this north arrow, but beside that, the colors and everything else were the same. And essentially what they were trying to say on this map was this, you see this kind of golden brown line here, is the proposed alignment for the new Interstate 11 across the Intermountain West here. And they were trying to show that the lands that were protected from being developed upon. So that would be federal lands and Native American lands. So they put all these lands on here. They have all these different categories. And so I looked at this and I thought, okay, first of all, you know, the colors aren't that great. And to the credit, I just want to make a little side note here. I'm pretty sure this is designed by somebody that is colorblind. And so a lot of times, you know, his reaction to the colors, he tends to pick these brighter colors. And so, because when I asked him about that, he said, well, I was like, oh, I didn't realize he was colorblind, but you know, that's kind of a good thing to know, because later I use that to my advantage and I would have him look at things to make sure he could distinguish between certain colors and so forth. But then we also agreed that, you know, he would share with the rest of the office so we could help him pick colors too. But anyway, what I did was, we don't need all these different categories to bring across the story. So let's see what I changed the map. And all I did was collapse the categories, because we didn't need all those individual ones. Just needed to know which ones were federal lands and which ones were Native nations. And that way I used a consistent color scheme, so they're complementary here, and then still be able to put the Interstate 11 alignment here, and you can see it right away, and then put the main idea right here. 55% of the land is protected from development. So notice by removing the clutter, collapsing categories, using a consistent color theme, even limiting the font, so I don't have a bunch of different fonts everywhere, they're all very similar. It makes it more appeasing, more appealing, more visually appealing, so that my message gets across. And again, notice I used the whole slide as well, took advantage of that. Now here's an example, a great example, Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. This is a great little story map. It's very simple. The colors are great. They're very complementary. It helps you to focus on what's important. They did a really great job. I really love this. I had to look for some Wisconsin examples to show you guys here. So I thought this was a really, really good one. It's simple, easy to follow and understand. There's not a lot of clutter. It's just a really great example. So look around you, look for places to be inspired. Look in magazines. This happens to be The Economist. So if you read The Economist, they've got a lot of little things like this. This happens to be a map, but they always usually have charts, maps, and little bitty ones in there that are short and small. They have a small area to use, so they're really good about removing clutter and just concentrating on the little things that are the key things that you need to know, or their audience needs to know. So look around you. And when you do, look for inspiration in these data visualizations, like this great dashboard, right? Ask yourself, what makes this work? Okay, what could make it better? What could make it useful for me? How can I adapt it to what I need to do in my project? So ask yourself these kinds of things. So get inspiration. So where do we go from here? I'm kind of rolling through all this stuff. Where do you go from here? Well, one place we can get, hold on here, I'm going to show you. So these are some resources. You can take a screenshot of this if you want, but also I'm sure my presentation here will be made available for you guys. I see Kim nodding her head. So you guys can feel free to get it out of the presentation. But one tip I thought I'd offer here, a resource that is not listed here, is if you're in an organization and they have a communications department or some group that does maybe pamphlets or brochures for the public or things like that, chances are they have a subscription to some sort of stock imagery website. When I worked for the Arizona Department of Transportation, we had a graphics department. I went over and made some friends with them, and I said, hey, do we have any stock photos I can use for this presentation I'm putting together? And they said, well, yeah, we have a subscription to this and this. If you want to look through it, tell us which ones you want, and they could get it for me. Same thing when I went to MAG is, get to network with your other teams and throughout your organization and get to know them, and you can share some resources, okay? And of course, there are some free ones here that you can get, but sometimes they're kind of limited, and you may need to end up getting some of the subscription ones. So that's why I wanted to point out about working within your organization. And then some other resources here. These are some great books and websites, information that have really helped me. I can't list them all. I have tons of books and websites I'm always trying to learn more from. But to top it off, so this is the first one I talked about, The Great Visualization, is Alberto Cairo. Highly recommend any of his books. He's actually a professor of, I'll probably get the school wrong, but I think it's University of Florida, of journalism and data visualization. And he's got some great stuff. And look for him on Twitter. I think he's probably Alberto Cairo on Twitter. He's got some great stuff he posts there too. Another, if you want to improve your Excel charts and chart skills, this one by Stephanie Evergreen, it has some like exercises you can walk through that show you how to do some really cool Excel charts. And of course, I'm going to wind it up by summarizing up all my power tips for you. There's the 5 great qualities of visualization, and my 10 power tips there are, of course, to reiterate, understand your data, know your audience, create your story, even if it's just one chart or map or a whole huge website. You got to storyboard it, figure out what it is you want to say, design for your medium. What are you doing? A poster, a presentation, a website, and focus in on what's important by removing clutter, limiting your fonts and colors. Colors are always hard. I always have a hard trouble with that, but there's a lot of great. Color Brewer is a great resource. Color Brewer, most GIS people know of that one. And be open to change. So get feedback from people. That was my number 8. So for example, one time I made this really cool chart and I thought it was really neat and had these, I can't even really describe it, but I made this great chart and I gave it to one of my co-workers and I said, hey, what do you think of this? And I had to keep explaining to him how to read it. I thought it was great because it was this cool little design and but he couldn't read it. So it wasn't effective. And I had to go back, and change it and go back to something simple, which is what you need to do. So, you got to be open to change. It's not really our playground as the one doing all the design. Sometimes we get a little carried away. I mean, speaking for myself, I get carried away with something that I think is really cool. And then somebody says, what is that saying? So be open to change. And of course, get inspiration from other people. That's the biggie. And so I think I've gone within my limits here pretty well. And this is my contact information. Feel free to email me if you want. And if there's any questions, I know I powered through a lot of that stuff, but I have a lot, but I'm open to questions.
There is a question in the chat. Lori Alec, what software programs do you like to use for your layouts?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to say it depends. If I'm doing maps, most of the time I'm using ArcMap and slowly moving over to ArcPro. I'm a late adopter, I guess. I see some people laughing. I'm going to stop share here. Go back to the, just see my cipher. Anyways, to go on with, I use ArcMap. I also use a lot of Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator. I'm an Illustrator person. Esri just came out with a really cool thing where you can bring maps into Illustrator. I've done some of the tutorials and stuff, but I haven't done that too much. But most of my graphics and stuff I do in either Illustrator or I do a lot of the maps in ArcMap, and I also use Excel. for all my charts. And I don't really create graphics in PowerPoint. I make stuff and then put them in there. So if that answered the question.
Any tips or resources for addressing colorblind issues from Mike Kutnick?
That's a great question. Like I said, I had the advantage of finding out that I had a coworker that was colorblind, so I used him a lot. But Color Brewer, if you go to the Color Brewer website, they have a way where you can toggle on for colorblind safe colors, and I highly recommend that. Color Brewer, COLOR Brewer, like coffee brewer, BREWER.com. So that's you'll say shaking your heads. So yeah, that's what I would suggest. Run it through some of those if you have issues.
I have discovered while using Color Brewer that sometimes it's difficult because it doesn't always give you the color combination numbers that you need. And also it doesn't want to do qualitative data. It only wants to do quantitative data. So that's the issue that I have is like, I don't necessarily want to do everything in a qualitative manner or quantitative manner. I want to do it qualitatively.
That makes sense. There's another one called Color Schemer. I'm going to try to type it in the chat here. I think it's colorschemer.com. I don't have my web browser open. And then there's another one, I think it's called Paleton, something like that. I guess I could pop it up. But there's a lot of different color resources out there. I mean, I also use, if you have Adobe products, they also have, Adobe has the thing where you can get some color insights and get some suggested color ramps. So there's those sorts of things. Like I said, I struggle with trying to get colors right, and I agree with you. It is hard. Adobe Illustrator Online is free. Oh, there's another one that's free. That's right. Oh, thank you, Hannah, for putting that in there. There's another one that's free, like kind of like Adobe Photoshop. If you need to do something that's not vector stuff, it's called Pixlr. I think if you I just typed that in there. If you Google that, you can find that. I used to use that when I worked at MAG because I didn't have Photoshop at the office. I had it at home, but I didn't have it at the office because I didn't have an extra license for it. But Pixlr, I could use in my browser and just make some quick update, resize pictures and that sort of thing. GIMP. Thank you. That's another one I usually say. GIMP is a open source vector illustrator, like Illustrator. GIMP is an open source one. A lot of people, it's very popular. Thanks, Scott, for putting that in there. That's a really good tip.
Yeah, that's the one I use.
When you guys want to read Mike's?
Yep. Mike Kutnick, one tip when using simple point symbols that you know will overlap, set transparency at the individual symbol to around 50%. It is attractive and provides an easily perceived sense of density of the points.
Excellent tip. Excellent. Excellent. I love it. Pixabay. Wow, you guys have all these great tips on here. Can you save these, send some of these back to me, Jennifer, in the chat?
We can definitely save the chat out.
All right, because never stop learning from other people. That's why I love giving this presentation, because I keep learning more, have to adapt. In fact, I'm doing this presentation again next week for Arizona. And a second part that I have to put together, be more tips. Walking through different changing, updating, creating better charts and maps. I'll do a little more walkthrough of that. But anyway, is there any more questions? Comments? Anybody have some other great insights? I love these tips.
We've got about 5 minutes.
Nobody has any great tips.
So how's your weather down there, Jamie?
It's hot.
Yeah.
Let me look at my thermometer. Show you. The top one is outside, 89.2 degrees.
Missed that.
I'm in Tucson,
Yeah.
Louisiana. I'm in southern Arizona. I'm actually outside of Tucson. I kind of live in the country at the base of the Rincon Mountains. So I have a nice, beautiful area. Unfortunately, we usually have monsoon, and so it starts cooling off. So usually have a lot of rains. This year was driest one after 15, 20 years. It's very, very dry. So it's bad. Joseph Kursky's on here.
Yep, he's going to be speaking in the panel that's coming up right after you.
Oh, I'm sticking around.
Okay.
83 there in Denver, huh, Joseph? Wow.
No heckling the presenters.
Well, what? Yeah, no. I love Joseph. Who doesn't love him? Wow.
So yeah,
you
right
guys
now
have
it's 70 degrees here.
59. Oh, I got to get my jacket out for that.
I think my office is colder than it is outside though. It's typically the
Yeah.
way it is.
Low 50s. Yeah, see, I've lived here in Arizona for over 30 years, so I'm so used to the heat that when it gets cold, I can handle that. You guys probably would melt coming out here in the heat. But yeah,
Well, it does get up into the hundreds in the summer. So
yeah.
we're an equal opportunity weather system.
That's awful because you're probably more humid than here
Yep.
too. At
Yep.
least the dry does make a difference.
Yep, it does.
So,
Yeah.
anyway. Well, this was really great. I'm glad you guys had me on. I'm going to stick around for the next one here.
Okay.
If anyone has any more, hopefully everybody, and like I said, the presentation is available, I guess. So you guys, I did put my notes, all my speaker notes. So part of what I do to help prepare myself is I type in what I'm going to say in the notes. So you guys have all the stuff in there.
Oh,
There's not too many
fantastic.
typos.
Yep.
We'll
After the
forgive you.
conference, we'll have a nice link for all the presentations, and we'll have the recordings as well when we get a chance to chop them all up. So.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you
Right.
very much, Jamie.